We are on video 9 in a series on the historical reliability of the Gospels. In this video, we are asking how they compare with other outside information. Do the Gospels mention people, places, and events that can be confirmed with our knowledge of history? Let's take a look. Quite a lot of work has been done comparing the Gospels to what we know about history. For instance, the first 3 chapters of Luke mention 11 historical leaders whose names are confirmed by sources outside the Gospels. This shouldn't surprise us given Luke's track record elsewhere. The historian Colin Hemmer chronicled 84 confirmed details in the last 16 chapters of Acts, also written by Luke. Since Matthew and Mark contain many of the same details in Luke, we could say, by comparison, that they are also historically accurate. John is probably the least trusted among the 4 Gospels by critical scholars, but New Testament scholar Craig Blumberg did a similar test on John's book to see how it aligns with our knowledge of history. Some confirmed details would be the use of stone water jars, the location of Jacob's well, the hostility between Jews and Samaritans, the topography of Western Galilee, the location and description of the 5 colonnades at the pool of Bethesda, the location for the pool of Siloam, the distance from Bethany to Jerusalem, first-century burial wrappings, and the use of spices, Caiaphas as the high priest, the village of Ephraim, and many others. Norman Geisler and Frank Turek found at least 30 people mentioned in the New Testament who are confirmed by archaeology or ancient writings, saying that their search was not even exhaustive. Many of these people are from the 4 Gospels. Some people will object that the Gospels were wrong about other details. For instance, Pilate. Yes, he was a governor of the time, but in the Gospels he seems reluctant to make up his mind and somewhat a pushover when the Jews pressure him to crucify Jesus. Critics point out that Pilate was not a pushover and would have gladly done what he wanted to with Jesus without allowing the Jews to pressure him one way or another. But the Gospels give a good reason why Pilate would have been hesitant with Jesus. He found no crime deserving punishment. The issue was especially acute since a cross was reserved for the worst kinds of criminals. He eventually gave way to the Jews' pressure because of the unrest of the crowd's demands and because he was worried about what Jesus would mean for his relationship with Caesar. The story is not nearly as crazy or far-fetched as many would have us believe. Others will argue that Herod's massive slaughter of male children in Matthew 2:16 was made up. They say that certainly an event of this size would be recorded in history, but it's not. However, the Zondervan Bible Background Commentary has this to say: only 123 men returned to Bethlehem from the Babylonian deportation, and it appears not to have grown beyond a small village of perhaps 1,000 people at the birth of Jesus. Herod's forces kill all the infant boys under the age of 2 years, which would calculate to between 10 to 30 boys. Although this number of infant boys massacred would be a huge loss for the village of Bethlehem, it is not an incident that stands out significantly when seen in the light of other horrific events in Herod's infamous career, and historians would have easily bypassed it. Herod's massacre is one example of many details in the Gospels that you might think should have been talked about by other ancient writers. But just because it's not present in our historical knowledge outside the Gospels doesn't mean it didn't happen. Consider this. In that time, most people wouldn't bother to write stuff down because they primarily transferred information through word of mouth. Even if they wanted to write something, many of them were illiterate or did not have the proper materials. Even if they did write something, the material they wrote on would likely have dissolved after a few hundred years. The only reason we have any ancient historical writings is that copies were made to preserve the writing, but we should not take it for granted that everything a person writes will be preserved for us by copyists. All in all, we have plenty to show that the Gospels corroborate well with other historical details we know about outside the Gospels. It helps to show that they are historically reliable sources. Our final video coming up will put the Gospels through what you might consider to be the hardest test yet. What did the enemies of Christianity have to say about the Gospels? Do they admit some details were true? Do they sidestep the problems? If the Gospels contain any historical inaccuracies, you would expect the enemies of Christianity to be all over it. So stick around, and I'll see you then.